welcome to Moments with Marianne. I am so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have an amazing show coming right up. Our first guests are Dr. Max Gomez and Dr. Robin L. Smith, and they're here today to talk to us about their new book, Cells Are the New Cure, the cutting-edge medical breakthroughs that are transforming our health. So Dr. Max Gomez is very well known for his reporting he's done for Dateline, The Today Show, and 48 Hours. Over more than 3 decades, he's earned 9 Emmy Awards, 3 New York State Broadcasters Association Awards, and UPI's Best Documentary Award. So Dr. Robin L. Smith is a global thought leader in the regenerative medicine industry, one of the fastest growing segments of modern-day medicine. She received her MD from Yale University and maintains a regular column for the Huffington Post. In June 2016, Dr. Smith was awarded the Women of Power and Influence Award from the National Organization of Women, and in 2014, she was awarded the Brava Award, which recognizes top women business leaders in the greater New York area. So it is my great honor to introduce both Dr. Max Gomez and Dr. Robin L. Smith to the show.
Thanks, Marianne. Happy to be here.
What a joy it is to have you here. And what a great book. Oh, my goodness. It is got a lot of profound, cutting-edge information in it. But before we get started with that, I have to ask, how did the two of you get to the point where you're working on this project together?
Robin, why don't you tell your version of it, and then I'll tell you mine, since we usually remember it a little bit differently.
Absolutely. Well, Max and I have known each other for, I think, more than 15 years at this point, and have worked on a lot of great things together, a lot of philanthropy and getting these, exciting health systems and technology, being part of the emergence of healthcare. And we started about 8 years ago and working with the Vatican on educating the world on the advances of stem cells and now cell therapy, and really having people understand they don't have to choose between science and faith. So that's the journey that has taken us to write 2 books, and this is our second book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my version is pretty much the same. I'll just expand a little bit on that. I started back, as Robin said, many years ago when I started making some videos with her to explain stem cells, adult stem cells, stem cell banking, and so forth. And that evolved into this collaboration with the Vatican to explain to people a little bit about stem cells and their potential and so forth. And as Robin said, this is our second book. And I think what sort of impelled us, if you will, to do this second book is after the third Vatican conference that Robin and I helped organize and then moderated major parts of. The science that has evolved and is evolving so rapidly was so exciting after this last, the energy and the excitement about the science and the way this is really, I think, going to help transform the way medicine is practiced in this 21st century. It was just so exciting. We felt, we really have to tell people about this because the change is really coming very soon. And I don't think enough people know about it or appreciate it. So that's kind of what led us to this.
I think with us, what's been so great in working together is we've taken, high science, really exciting cutting-edge technology, and, with Max, so able to take something complicated and make it something that anyone can understand when they're in the medical field or not, and bringing patient stories into the mix has really been a very powerful tool to help people understand that, science is emerging. There's hope for them if they're ill or someone in the family is ill. And it's these stories and these books seem to get people very excited about, the future of medicine. And as Max said, the transformation that we think will occur.
Yeah, and that's really key, is that this is not meant to be a medical book or a book aimed at scientists or researchers. This is really aimed at the general public to help them understand what can be a kind of a complicated topic at some point. But this is really the idea here, is to help everybody understand and get it, if you will. This is simplifying it so that people will understand it.
Well, and I think over the years, stem cell, any kind of science that's surrounding that seems to have gotten some pretty bad rap. And so it's so exciting to hear that now they're, instead of maybe different ways that they were using in the past, they're really looking at how we can use our own stem cells to grow parts that we need or to help fix us.
Absolutely, and I think it's not just your stem cells, but it's all the immune cells of your body. We're learning how to teach them, how to replicate them and make them more powerful to help, repair damaged tissue and take care of foreign viruses and cancer cells. So it's been, as Max said, it's been an incredible emergence over the last, really 3 to 5 years, and it's amazing how much we're able to do now with the cells that we have naturally, to enhance and enable them to help us heal.
And Marianne, to your point, the whole world, the term stem cell has been kind of muddied and misunderstood a lot, or completely misunderstood, if you will, for a long time. And you're right that a lot of people sort of assume that stem cells imply or necessarily mean embryonic stem cells. And of course, there are many people for religious or other reasons who object to using embryonic stem cells, because it usually implies needing to take them from an embryo, which may or may not end up destroying the embryo. And so the beauty of this is now, and we can get into this here in just a minute, I hope, is explaining that we don't need embryonic stem cells now. We have what we call adult stem cells and transformed cells and so forth. So it's really pretty exciting. I often tell people when Robin or I went to medical school, we were taught basically there is no such thing as a quote unquote adult stem cell. We're told that we have all of the stem cells and all of the brain cells and heart cells that we're ever going to have when we're born. And then, of course, we spend most of our college years trying to kill them off with tequila. But what we really end up doing, as it turns out, in the last handful of years, 5 to 7 or 8 years, we found that we've got stem cells almost in every tissue that you look for, or that you look for them. Brain and heart and fat. It turns out there's tons of stem cells in fat. So we've got a lot of very rich sources of stem cells that we can use, that we don't need to go down the road of embryonic stem cells.
I think that's such a comfort for a lot of people, because I know there was a huge push back in the day in regards to that, and in some parts kind of rightfully so, because it just seemed like such a tough way to have something work, be a workable science for us,
Absolutely.
And, they're in teeth, and they're in the umbilical cord and placenta, and there's just so many different ways that you can extract these cells. And all these clinical trials, when we started, 10, 12 years ago, there was like 457 clinical trials with adult stem cells, and now there's over 4,500. So people are really looking at where you get the cells, how you administer them back for different illnesses, and how many cells to give them. And we've seen quite a bit of progress.
I think that's so absolutely exciting. I know in your book you talk about stem cells being used for chronic muscle and joint pain. So how is that possible?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that it depends on whether the pain is due to arthritis, for example. If it's due to rheumatoid arthritis, which is a very destructive disease, That's what we call an autoimmune disease. And we are now learning how to take cells, in this case not even stem cells, but our own immune cells, to rebalance our immune system so that we don't attack our own tissues. Maybe we ought to take a half a step back and explain, things like type 1 diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis are what we call autoimmune diseases, where our own immune system mistakenly attacks some of our own tissues. In the case of diabetes, it's the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. In the case of rheumatoid arthritis, it's the cells that line our joints. And for whatever reason, the immune system thinks that those things don't belong there, and so they attack them. And it turns out that we can probably rebalance them, turn our immune system, turn it down, if you will, turn the immune response down so that it doesn't go after and attack. So that's one of the ways that we can go after joint pain, for example.
Dr. Maddox, I'm going to say this real quick before you hop in, Dr. Robin, but Dr. Robin's right. You really explain things so well that it's really easy to understand how this science works. So kudos to you.
Well,
yeah, he really does. It's their ability to understand it and be able to explain it.
That's my job on TV. So I've been doing it for a long time. Robin, what were you going to say were you going to say something about joint pain?
I was going to also say, sort of similar, if the two bones are rubbing on each other, people are also using stem cells to rebuild cartilage. And that bone pain that sort of people think are in the joints, because the bones are rubbing in the hip or the knees can be, pretty painful as well. And that's another area of regenerative medicine where these stem cells are being put into those joints and building cartilage and other types of, repair from the damaged tissue. It could be just a torn cartilage or tendon as well.
And that's a huge issue. What Robin's describing here is far more common, really, than rheumatoid arthritis. That's osteoarthritis, and that's really the leading cause or reason that people have total knee and hip replacements. That is sort of what people call the wear and tear arthritis, and it's kind of been the holy grail of orthopedic research is figure out a way to regrow that cartilage that is just being worn down or has been traumatized and just isn't nice and smooth and slippery the way it's supposed to be. So it looks like we may be able to get some stem cells to regrow that cartilage on the end of bones. And boy, if we can do that, that's a huge home run. And all of these things, it's going to happen. It may not happen before I need my knee replacement, but I'm pretty sure we're going to need it. I hope so.
I think it will. And even disc disease, right? Disc, people have such terrible back pain, and very often when you start taking the pain medicines, it's hard to come off of it, and there's a lot of disability out there. So if you can avoid having to fuse the bones and become reliant on the pain pills, that's going to make a dramatic difference in the way a person's life is lived, who has back pain from disc disease.
Mm-hmm. I have a dear friend whose horse rolled over on her, and she ended up having to have her back fused. And it was a pretty bad accident. And she had the choice of being on medication or dealing with the pain. And she got to the point where it's like, the medication makes me too loopy. I don't want to do it. I'm just going to deal with the pain. So it'd be so great to have this third option for people, and think of what it would do with the opiate epidemic we're having right now too,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I think that, that definitely will happen, sooner than some of the things that I think will take longer and we hope will happen, which would be, a spinal cord injury or, putting those nerves together and organ replacements and, some of the things that I think, the stem cells, we're learning what to do with them and how how to, make those parts of the body, and that will take a little bit longer. But it's pretty exciting.
It's an exciting time we're in with this kind of science. My goodness. Now, so this is also going to be able to help people who have stroke or Alzheimer's?
Oh boy, that's an area that's really, really exciting. Let me tell you about stroke first. And it turns out, let's take half a step back again. In the nervous system, regrowing cells, like you're trying to do, for example, to regrow cartilage cells, that's only part of the problem, because you can regrow brain cells, but if they don't make the appropriate connections, then you really haven't accomplished as all that much, or it's just not all that useful. The key is you got to have brain cells, and they've got to connect to the right places. So in stroke, you've damaged an area of the brain, and you've lost some brain cells there that have died off. And a little over a year ago, I guess it's been now, neurosurgeons at Stanford published a paper saying that they took patients with chronic stroke patients, meaning they were a year or more out after their stroke. And the conventional wisdom has always been that whatever function you recover in the first 6 to 12 months after a stroke, that's kind of it. That's all you're ever going to regain. Turns out now we've learned from a variety of different studies that the brain is very plastic, is what the neuroscientists call it. That meaning that it can rewire and reorganize a little bit. But anyway, so they took these patients, some of whom were basically in a wheelchair or partially paralyzed. There was one patient who could barely speak. And they took these generic stem cells from 2 different donors and injected them via small burr holes in the skull into the area of the stroke in these chronic stroke patients. I believe they did, it might have been about a dozen or 15, if I recall correctly. And in a very short period of time, these patients recovered an amazing amount of function. I mean, I saw some of the video, and we did this in a story on CBS here in New York. There was one young woman who was in a wheelchair, could barely speak, was partially paralyzed on one side, and a very short time later, she was up, walking, speaking clearly. She's now married, and last year she was pregnant, so I'm assuming she's had a baby by now, and it really is remarkable. These cells were able to either regrow. It's not clear whether they made new brain cells or just facilitated the brain's own natural healing. But one way or another, you got recovery from stroke using these generic donor stem cells. So it is absolutely remarkable what these stem cells have done. And again, it's not clear whether or not at this point, because these are living patients, and so they haven't gone back in to look at their brains and see what they did, whether or not they actually made new brain cells or just facilitated the natural healing process or reconnection of the cells that had survived. It's not exactly clear how the stem cells did what they did, but from the standpoint of the patient, they don't really care. They got their function back.
Oh my goodness! And her life back, what a success story that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I know that we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. There's alluding about how this can help fight cancer as well.
Robin, you want to give us a little on the cancer
I'll
side?
start with that a little bit. So, that's a really exciting area, but for years we've been using stem cells, which is a bone marrow transplant. A person gets chemotherapy and destroys their immune system, kills the cancer cells, but then in order for them to have an immune system that can fight infection going forward, you can get a bone marrow transplant, which is simply stem cells. But people didn't realize that a bone marrow transplant is a stem cell transplant. But now we're realizing that we can do even more to the different cells of our immune system, our T cells and different cells that we can reprogram in a way to become more aggressive in killing and fighting cancer cells, or to use as a vehicle to bring sort of a chemotherapeutic or something that will destroy the cancer cells. So we're learning how to amplify our own immune system to heal or repair or destroy invaders that, come into our system and kill tissue. Max, do you want to add more?
Yeah, one of the what's really exciting, and Marianne, this is something that what's important here is that this is not sort of pie in the sky off in the future somewhere. Mm-hmm. This one therapy, cancer therapy, using the immune system and using your own cells is something that was approved by the FDA just about a month ago for leukemia, for really resistant leukemia in kids, and it's a therapy called CAR T cells or cellular therapy. And I'll give you the little quick rundown, which is you take these are kids who had already failed all conventional therapies for their leukemia. Basically, they had really no other hope at this point. They were heading down the road to death. And so what they did was they took the patient's own T cells, which is a type of white blood cell, immune cell in these kids, pulled them out, and then in the lab manipulated them, used a little genetic engineering to insert some genes that then would recognize their own leukemia cells. So they now had these little receptors on them that were able to go after or recognize their own leukemia cells. They multiplied them somewhat in the lab and then just injected them a little simple IV infusion back into the patient. And they continue to multiply in the patient. But now you can imagine this is what the military calls a target-rich environment. Mm-hmm. These T cells just went to town going after the leukemic cells in the patients. And the first patient who had it done was a young woman by the name of Emily Whitehead. And she was literally on death's doorstep. They didn't think she would survive more than a few more days, they told her parents. So this was kind of she was patient number one. It was a Hail Mary, if you will. And they treated her with that. And they estimated that her own T cells now killed several pounds of leukemia cells that were floating around in her body. And she just a few months ago had her checkup. She's now 5 years disease-free after this treatment. And they've done a bunch of these patients enough so that the FDA just approved the therapy. So it's a real deal. It's actually happening. It's in real life. It's curing people of their cancer right now.
Oh my goodness, that is such amazing news, because I think anyone that you talk to knows somebody that's been touched by cancer. Mm-hmm. If it's not in their immediate family, they have a friend or a cousin or somebody that's had to go through the battle with this. So to have this come out is just amazing.
And this is what is the first kinds of cancers that are going to be amenable to this kind of approach are what they call liquid tumors, which means leukemias, lymphomas, that type of thing. Solid tumors, which are more common, are a little bit tougher because they develop a resistance. They become sort of like a walled medieval city. They build up walls and make them a little more resistant to this sort of an attack. But there are now a variety of experimental approaches that are being developed to break down those defenses that the solid tumors have to go after them. And it will probably be multi-pronged. There'll be a variety of different things that will have to be done in order to break those defenses down. But either way, it's happening. It's going to happen.
Well, that's exciting news. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that, Dr. Robin? I mean, what an exciting topic.
It really is. And what's important to know is everyone has these T cells, and this is what fights infection and really helps us to be resistant to a lot of these different diseases and cancers. But these cancer cells grow so rapidly, the T cells aren't able to find them and destroy them. So being able to manipulate the T cells to have more of them and then be more aggressive or more targeted to what they should kill it's pretty exciting when you think about the other applications, as Max said, that I think we'll see in the future.
And what the point of our book is, cells are the new cure, is that, I think Robin and I both believe that pretty soon, sometime in the very near future, you might end up going to your doctor and not get a prescription for a drug, but get a prescription for cells. A type of cell, whether it's an immune cell or some other manipulated cell or cells that are going to grow cartilage or grow brain cells, that sort of thing, or heart cells that'll repair the damage after a heart attack. You're going to get a prescription for one way or another for cells, and cells are going to be what will actually repair the damage that we've sustained over the years. Cells are a lot smarter than we are. When we try to make drugs might affect one or two biochemical pathways in our system, and there's always going to be multiple side effects from that. But cells sort of seem to know what to do if you put them in the right neighborhood and turn them loose in the right environment at the right time. They kind of know what to do, and they seem to be much more effective at treating disease or repairing damage than any of us can figure out how to do it. So eventually, it's not just going to be chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, drugs. We're going to add cells to that armamentarium.
I think that is such an exciting thing. I mean, I'd love to go to the doctor and have him prescribe cells if you get a cold or, something happens, as opposed to, and I think a lot of people nowadays feel this way, as opposed to getting a prescription for something,
It's going to be very, very interesting. Now, obviously, it's not there's never a panacea, and it's not going to cure everything all the time, but it has such an amazing potential that I think it really is going to transform medicine.
And it's a shift from treating symptoms toward curing illness. And, that's a big change.
That's a huge shift. It's really getting to the root of the problem instead of, putting the Band-Aid on it,
Absolutely. It's going to be a very cool. It's going to be a very cool time. This is really going to change things. And let me add one more thing, because this is another area that people, we talk about arthritis and autoimmune and diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, and cancer, which is huge, of course. Stroke is another area. But the other area that's really exciting that Robin and I have dealt with, and we've had a number of presentations at these Vatican conferences, is anti-aging. We're going to be able to live, to 100 and more, but nobody wants to live to 100 if you're wearing Pampers and don't know, and can't recognize your own children. This is about living to 100 or more and being healthy to do that. And this is something that stem cells may help us do as well. There's some really exciting anti-aging strategies using stem cells to rejuvenate our tissues and keep us healthy and cognizant and sharp and alive for much longer than we've been able to live for up to this point. So it's everything from disease to just aging, that we're going to be able to be healthy for a long, long time.
I'm sure there are people wanting to line up around the block for that one, for the clinical trials. For all of them.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Everyone it's just what a phenomenal time we live in, and gosh, what great science is coming forward from all of this. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. Now, when we talk about the clinical trials, and I know, if there are people that get involved in that, is that something, I know in your book you talk about some of the positives and some of the challenges faced in clinical trials.
Well, it is challenging. I mean, it's not everyone. In order to show that something works, you need people to get it and then people not to get it, right? So there are these control groups where, individuals don't necessarily get the treatment. So, and, in order to be sure that the results are coming from that particular treatment, there's a lot of, other treatments you can't be on at the same time. So it's a little complicated to put these trials together. And it's hard to understand when people are not necessarily in the main cities that these trials do exist and how they can be a part of it. So some of it is education. Some of it is making sure you meet the criteria where the results would be able to be, informative that drug actually was the reason for that effect. So there are always challenges, but it's an exciting time, and more and more people, I think, are getting involved with the clinical trials and having some pretty astounding results.
And just to be clear there, because there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about clinical trials when it comes to things like cancer therapies. If you are, say, taking part in a clinical trial, and as Robin described, you have a control group. The control group doesn't not get any treatment. It's the control group gets whatever the standard of care is for that particular cancer, and then the experimental group gets a standard of care plus whatever it is that they're testing. So people think that, no, I'm going to be a guinea pig and I'm not going to get any treatment at all. No, that's not how it works. You're still going to you'll get the standard of care, whatever that is for that particular cancer, and the other group will get that standard of care plus, whether it be stem cells or a new drug or different radiation or whatever it is, so that people don't have to fear being part of a clinical trial.
And at our conference, which was at the Vatican, Vice President Biden was there, and he was talking a little bit about his moonshot program, and said basically 5% of people with cancer actually get into trials. So it's a very low number.
That is a very low number, and it's is that because there's not as many trials available, or they don't fit the criteria?
Well, you have to have, the criteria are necessarily fairly restrictive because you want to make sure, as Robin said, that whatever it is, whatever effect you see is actually due to the treatment. But I think it's just because people are a little bit hesitant or afraid of them. Is that what you think, or is that how you look at it, Rob?
I think part of it is people are hesitant. Part of it, if they are going to be in the controlled trial, they don't want to have to then wait to get treatment after the period of surveillance. And part of it is just knowledge, not even knowing they're available. That's what I love about what Max does, and his ability to talk about these therapies, and because people don't even know what they are and that they're available, and that there's a place on the website that you can go and look up based on your disease or different pathology, what's out there. And so some of it is just making the information more consumer friendly.
Well, your book does that tremendously. I mean, Cells Are the New Cure I just absolutely loved it. I thought you guys explained everything very well, and it was still to the point where I could understand, I understand science, but it's still done in layman's terms where, like anyone can pick it up and really get what your book is talking about. It's such exciting news. So I really appreciate the two of you spending the time here and sharing your thoughts and wisdom on this topic with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear that we actually succeeded in what we were trying to do and make it understandable to people. So I'm glad we got that part done as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Any last thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, let's see, Robin, aside from buy our book.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, the book just came out, so they do need to go get their own copy, and they can get it anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's also that for anyone that's suffering or has a family member, have hope, because medicine is changing so rapidly and the technologies are emerging such, I think we're going to be able to save a lot of lives. And as Max said earlier, he hopes it's in his time frame. I think it's a lot sooner than many people think.
Mm-hmm.
Ditto and amen.
I'm all for that. Well, thank you both for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thanks,
Marianne. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. We're going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
This is Jennifer McGill. My highly anticipated new album, Unbreakable, is now available at jennifermcgill.com. Everything from power ballads to high-energy jam-out-in-your-car songs. I used my highest joys and deepest pains to create empowering songs of love, strength, healing, and restoration so that you can be unbreakable too. Get your copy of Unbreakable today from jennifermcgill.com. 'Cause who doesn't want to be unbreakable?
The highly acclaimed and newly released book, The Hand Part 2 by Lynn Van Prague Grattan, describes the journey between a psychic medium and a family who lost a son. Messages from Beyond Eternity's Gate is of love and healing. For more information, visit www.lynnvanprague-grattan.com. That's www.lynnvanprague-grattan.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. I am so delighted to be introducing our next guest, Lani Muelrath, and she's here today to talk to us about her new book, The Mindful Vegan. Now, Lani is an award-winning health educator and best-selling author, speaker, TV host, and is well known for her expertise in plant-based, active, and mindful living. She's been featured on ABC, CBS, Prevention Magazine, USA Today, the Saturday Evening Post, the Huffington Post, and many other media outlets. So Lani has been a vegetarian and vegan for over 45 years, and she's been teaching in health and wellness for more than 40 years. So let's welcome to the show, Lani.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm just so pleased to be here. I'd like the invitation. Thank you.
Well, what an inspirational book, and I'm so delighted we get to talk about this today.
Yay.
And for our listeners that are kind of new with your journey, why don't you share a little bit about, because I know you've written other books that have been such great successes, why don't you just share a little bit about your journey that's kind of brought you here?
That's an excellent question, because I realized as I was working on The Mindful Vegan that I now have this kind of trilogy of transformation that are evidence of my own personal transformation. So with it being my third book, and my first book was on fitness, and my second book was on plant-based nutrition, and now the all-important getting some degree of mastery over your habits of reactivity and thinking with the Mindful Vegan. So this collection reflects my own personal journey that goes back a long, long time ago. I could think back to even 45 years ago, and I was really stimulated to understand all this stuff because I struggled with not only my weight, but my relationship with food, health, eating, my body. I just kind of wanted to heal that scenario. So I started with studies in fitness, and I got a master's degree in physical education and teaching kinesiology, and I got the fitness down. And then as I moved from eating vegetarian, which I went vegetarian 45 years ago, about the same time when I was teaching yoga, and that progressed to all we know now about whole foods, plant-based nutrition, and to the way that I eat today. And that made an impact on my health, and my situation with my weight, that whole relationship. But it wasn't until I developed a mindfulness practice that I undertook about 25 years ago that everything shifted so that actually was successful for me. And I ended up ending this cycle of dieting and weight up and down. I ended up dropping 40 to 50 pounds from my highest weight, and that's been off for like 20 years. So longevity with that, and just established that good relationship with all of it, and I really wanted, and that's extended to other areas of my life.
Well, what an inspiration that is, because I know for a lot of people, there's always this talk about weight, and especially I think there's a kind of an epidemic going through the U.S. where people are just kind of struggling with that, along with depression and all these other things, addictions to food. So, and so it makes me kind of think about, gosh, at what point did you realize through your journey that you can change your relationship with food?
I'll tell you what, it was instrumental with not only my first retreat that I went on where I learned this mindfulness technique, but I was in really, it can be very painful having these problems and struggling with eating and weight, just as you described. And I got to a point, Marianne, where I thought, you know what, I just want a good relationship with all this stuff. And that's what this harping on the weight loss. I've been at it for 30 years. My weight's been all over the place. There must be some other avenue. And the mindfulness practice helped me kind of let go of trying to micromanage food and eating in the way that I had been, that was leading to exactly what you have described, this kind of epidemic, disconcerting, unquieting connection with food, eating, and our body. And that then allowed me to let go of looking at dieting and eating as I knew it. But it took me a mindfulness practice to be able to kind of get under the fear of letting go of all those controls. We know they don't work, but what else do we know? And we just grasp onto them, and it just brings a lot of misery. And I learned so much about the body at the same time that it's really important, especially for those of us who have a genetic predisposition to easily gain or have a hard time letting go of weight, and we do. Some of us have more of that than others. That we have to honor our hunger and our fullness signals. And dieting only exacerbates the problem. We've all experienced cutting back, and then 4 or 5 days later, all we can do is plow through cookie dough and ice cream. Well, there's a biological drive for that. You're enzymatically driven to consume all the foods that are most contributing to a weight problem. So when you start to feed yourself with quality food on time as your body demands it, which is part of mindful eating, these problems can, to a large extent, fall away.
Well, and it's so great how you incorporate the mindful piece with this, because it's so easy for people, like how you're saying, if they are, do their dieting for 2 to 3 days, and then the weekend hits and they're scarfing down, whatever ice cream that's their favorite. It's then they get into this sense of, gosh, that was bad. Or gosh, I shouldn't have done this, and the guilt, and it's kind of a seesaw that goes back and forth. Yeah,
it's a horrible shame cycle that just, unless you get some kind of insight into it or a way to navigate it, it just perpetuates itself.
Well, and so when you started this journey and you came to this place where you're incorporating mindfulness with veganism, what was some of the tips or some of the ways that you were able to make that transition? Because it's I love how you married them both, in your technique, because most people are just like, wow, okay, I'm going to go vegan, and it's such a battle. It could be a battle if someone's used to certain types of food. And your book made it really easy to do these kind of baby steps to that transformation without having to get into this kind of place where you're thinking, gosh, I'm not going to be able to do it. It's too big a step.
Mm-hmm. Well, really basic tools are, and I have this throughout the Mindful Vegan, is to not go hungry. That ties in with what I was just previously saying. Mm-hmm. We have wedded in our minds that there's this virtue with cutting back a little bit, eating less, exercising more. But as stated earlier, this hooks our survival instinct and makes it impossible for us to maintain, which sends us back into the overeating cycle and the shame of that. So the first thing is to tune into our natural hunger and fullness signals, which can be a really daunting task. Some of us, myself included, those many years ago, only knew being stuffed or being starved. So you need to learn to connect with your interoception, and that's actually all the things within your body that tune you into everything, like whether you're hot or whether you're cold or whether you're hungry and whether you're full. And to remove ourselves from all the rules we have about shouldn't eat before this, shouldn't eat after that, better not have this. So that's part of it. And the way it's connected with veganism is that, to me, I'm sure you've seen a lot of books, Marianne, about mindful eating. There's a lot out there. But not a one of them connected this with a plant-based vegan plate. Like, shouldn't that be elemental? Like, what's on your plate? How to get there? Who is it? How does it connect with the health of our planet and your body? It's another step that, to me, is one reason I was so happy to bring this forward. This connects conscious eating on a whole other level. So I address both of those factors moving through the book, and it turns out the same skills that help you navigate your difficult relationship you might have had with food and eating and weight and all the shame around it also help you navigate conversations with others about changes you might be making in your lifestyle, and also help you navigate letting go of some of those things that are old favorites, because you start to create a little space around that's kind of reactivity. I've got to have this, I've got to have that. And as you feed yourself well, you become more discriminatory and more able to make better choices instead of gutting out a diet.
Well, and I mean, there's this saying, it's like you can't, if we consider our body a temple, we really can't be filling it with trash.
Yeah, it's one thing to know that intellectually, but emotionally it's like, if we're hungry, it doesn't matter. I'm going to trash it. You can't go hungry. And some people can eat really recklessly. We all know people who can live on M&Ms and they maybe have a big dinner and they're skinny. Well, that's not, once I got over that wasn't my body. I had spoiled brat syndrome for years. I wanted that to be me. Well, that didn't help because it wasn't me. It's not my body.
Hey, I get it. I have a friend who's like that. I mean, Lord knows where she puts all the food because she's as skinny as a twig, but it's just how her metabolism works,
Yeah, lucky duck.
So how can this practice help people who have things like food cravings and, the swings in emotion and addiction such as smoking?
Oh, absolutely. And yes, I'm glad you brought the smoking, because I can tell that you have read this book, Marianne, because I'm also an academic. I still teach the college level. I taught 6th grade for 20 years, which means I'm really skilled at taking what could be a complex problem and putting into a step-by-step thing. But I always want to have it backed up by the research. And we now have thousands of studies on mindfulness making a difference in stress reduction, interrupting cravings, addictions, obsessions, and all of those kinds of things. So the first thing is, with the addictions and with the cravings, I'm going to keep defaulting back to the first door of entry is to not be setting yourself up biologically for a craving. If you go on a fast for 3 days, you're going to crave all the worst foods because your body is going to be primed to save up for future famine. It doesn't know you just want to take an inch off your thigh or whatever. It thinks that you're in a stress state. So that's the first consideration. once you have taken the biological compelling nature of having to do what I call makeup eating off the table, then you can navigate cravings for what might be or high interest in old favorites or foods that aren't that interesting to you, which, by the way, I know this may be hard to believe, but they fall away if you're eating enough on time to a great extent. But in the Mindful Vegan, as you just referred to, I refer to some of the research that's been done on addictions and cravings. And the most dramatic one is the one on smoking, whereby mindfulness training was compared with the American Lung Association's gold standard, which is our Freedom from Smoking program. There were two groups, and they were both given the same amount of time, training, attention, follow-up, home support. And they had to be all people who, of course, were desirous of having some kind of smoking cessation. And as it turned out, after 17 weeks, those who participated in the mindfulness program were twice as effective as twice as successful as being in cessation of smoking than those in the Freedom from Smoking program. And it's because of the way mindfulness practice trains you to interrupt this craving process. And this might be a good time to just give my short definition of mindfulness. Would that be helpful, do you think?
Oh, yes, that'd be perfect. Thank you.
Of mindfulness practice is that mindfulness is a specific form of mental training, which I go through in the book. And it's a particular kind of attention you bring to your daily activities. Now, together, those two things reduce reactivity. Now think about how much happens to us every day that we're just reacting to one thing or another, whether it's an outburst or finding ourselves up to our wrist in a box of whatever. And it also leads to cultivation of positive brain states. And that's important. Cultivation of, meaning we are all inherently at peace and calm and have compassion and equanimity. And it's just because we are so caught up in following the impulses of our thinking that we get moved into parts of our brain that result in negative brain states such as cravings, addictions, obsessions, sadness, depression. So by doing some of this mental training, it's just like taking practice every day about not just following every impulse of thought we have. And then you learn to be able to translate that into your daily life. So as Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space, you have a choice. And in that choice lies your freedom. So with formal practice, as I teach it in the Mindful Vegan, you are practicing opening up that space, and then you can utilize that skill more skillfully in your life so that you can actually live more skillfully.
Well, and it kind of brings me to my next question. You touched a little bit on it, but I think a lot of times when people look at getting into a mindful practice, they think like it's going to be really difficult to do, and it's just like anything that you do. If you're going to be an athlete, you practice, or you're going to be good at the work that you do, you practice at it. So what are some of the common obstacles that you see that people have with starting their mindful practice in regards to veganism as well?
First, with the mindfulness practice itself is, I think the biggest obstacle is a misunderstanding of what this formal practice is like. I call it, you've been hearing me refer a little bit to formal and informal. So formal is spending a few minutes each day on a chair, on a cushion, whatever place is comfortable to you and suited to you, with this mental training of bringing your attention back to your point of concentration. This is training your brain for concentration and not to be so, impulsive, as it were. So many people think that it means you're going to have a quiet mind and they know they can't get their minds quiet. And that's absolutely true. Your mind is designed to jump around all over the place and it's part of our survival. We have to be on the alert to watch out for the sticks and the snakes. And we understand that, and knowing that is helpful. But mindfulness practice doesn't mean that you shut all that off. It means you learn to drop into a place where you can actually not identify with it. You can see all this activity going on, but you start to create that space of identifying with it or not. And this has manifold implications for self-regulation of emotion, dealing with relationships, and the relationship with you with food and eating. So the same thing happens when you, with veganism. So what do you perceive as the biggest challenge with people switching to letting go of animal products in their diet? I'd like to approach it that way. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of times what I've heard people say, it's like, well, I think my body really needs the protein. How am I going to get enough protein? Switching to a vegan diet. How is that even going to be possible? And then can I stick with it because I love my hamburgers,
Mm-hmm. Well, first thing is, if someone asks me the question, or they state that their body really needs this and that, what I think is that they need to have an expressed interest and desire to make this change. There has to be some moment of awakening that is asking them internally to make this most fundamental change in the way they approach food and actually lifestyle, with how we treat animals as objects or don't consider the environmental implications of what we eat. So I don't engage in a fight like that, because if someone is not interested in finding out where to get protein, then I can give them all the charts about how much is in beans and rice and broccoli, and it's not going to matter, because they're not really inviting the invitation. What they're really saying to me is, I don't want to change, so I'm sure it's this protein thing. If they ask in a way, or the conversation, and this is part, Marianne, this is part what the mindfulness practice does too. It helps you navigate these conversations. Not by giving you, I don't have like pat answers for you, but what happens is since you're practicing being present within the moment of what's going on, whether it's your breath, whether it's your body, you can also be more present with whoever it is you are talking to. You move yourself out of your conditioned reactive responses and really listen, and you may find that there is a question there that can be approached as you kind of intuit your way through the conversation, or it becomes clear that this is a person not interested in finding out more, and then maybe it plants a seed, just your little conversation, and move on. So that's really important. You feel compelled to show everybody, here's your protein, but unless the question is really there, you can be kind of wasting your time a little bit. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. But so let's say that someone has accepted like a vegan practice and they're looking to incorporate the mindfulness to it. Let's say they are having food cravings. Because that can happen. In fact, I just was chatting with a friend of mine who's vegan the other day, and she's wanting that little something sweet. So how do they work through that using a mindful practice?
All right. First, I'm going to bring it right back to, and I don't know what the sweet refers to, if it's a particular animal product-based sweet that you're concerned about, or they're just feeling drawn to sweets a lot. But the answer has already been addressed early in the conversation, when we understand that this drive to eat foods that are particularly designed to create easy fat storage for your body, and many sweets are like that, like ice cream and cookies. People call them carbs, but they're actually a bunch of, they're fat primarily. But that tells me, if I were to start, that doesn't happen to me anymore, by the way, because I tune into my body. I like eating those things on occasions, but I'm not addicted to them like I thought I was. They're just kind of enjoyable treats, or I can have a little bit of one. But that gives me the information that someone has to make up eating to do, if it is in the form of the sweets. I don't say eliminate all sweets and just because you're addicted and you need to break the addiction. I'm saying the best way to alleviate that need is go to the source, which means to feed yourself more responsibly. Maybe also you need to have more natural sweets in your diet, more fruits. And is it a problem? Or do you find that if you start in on some sweet, as you're describing, that is beyond control? That to me does not say addiction. That to me says hunger unmet, and that needs to be addressed first. If it's an animal product that they're really used to, people might want their cheese or their bacon, then being immersed in the reasons why you are doing something is very important, because we're going to kind of crave what we like, what we're used to, what we grew up with. People in our culture will have interest in food that people in maybe the Japanese culture are not interested in, and likewise us. We don't necessarily go for daikon radish, but, they're used to that. So you have to understand that. So finding pleasurable substitutions or replacements for things that there's veggie bacon out there and there's veggie ice cream, and all of those things are available to us. So there are things that you can put in as replacement, but you also have to make sure that you're eating enough and on time.
Okay. And I think that's just such great advice, because a lot of times maybe people, when they're starting their practice, either if it's with veganism or mindfulness, there's always these obstacles that come up. Well, but, I can do it, but it's going to take too much time, or it's too difficult to do the cooking, or I've got to really pay attention to everything, and I don't know how to do that. I have a monkey mind. So there's all these obstacles that come up that they have to work through, and your book is really good about being able to address each one of those. As far as like, these are the things that, it was just kind of like, here's the story, here's how it works, and here's how other people put it into practice and been very successful.
Well, I want it to be very accessible and very inclusive, and you'll notice that I address the time factor from the start since it's a 30-day plan. I set it up that way because I want people starting from the beginning, not reading this book about this great idea, and maybe I'll do that someday. But let's do this, and if day one is how long? 1 minute. 1 minute of practice. They just teach you how to, kind of the basics of posture. And day 2 is 2 minutes. We talk about the anchor that you use. So I really try to make it undaunting in that manner so that people can progress slowly. And there's another thing. I just finished recording an audio support for every single day of the 30 days that are free, will be downloadable from my website. I have in the Mindful Vegan, I have that access where to go and get it, because I have this generous thing about this book. I just want people finding out if this practice has something to do that will help them, because it has been enormous for me.
Well, and I know, for you, and I've, seen your books and read your books and also some of your videos as well, that, this was something that you struggled with until you found what worked for you.
Exactly. You can, as you know, I'm very transparent. I kind of tell it all, because that's what makes a difference for people. I don't want to give you pretty ideas. I want to get down, get dirty, and get to the real thing about how this works.
Yeah, you've been there, done that, So it's not like, oh gosh, she's just born skinny and she has no struggles. It's been.
I walked through fire. I really did. So you don't have to.
I'm all for that. And so I know in your book you talk about having a more plant-based diet, how that really affects the moods that we have. Why don't you share a little bit of that for our listeners?
Yeah, because there actually is research, it's in the Moods and Foods chapter in the Mindful Vegan, that if we don't have at least 3 to 5 servings of vegetables and fruits a day, which is to me, probably to you too, it's like, to have that before breakfast. But for some people, their vegetable is only French fry or only ketchup, and I know probably not many of your followers, but this is why it's such a prevalent problem. But if we don't have that minima, there is a distinct, research-proven correlation between better moods when you're having this bare minimum and when you are having less than it. So it makes a difference that way, and it also makes a difference energetically. If we can be more at ease with the impact of what our plate is having on our health, on our environment, the health of the planet, on the sentient beings that we share her with, how many ways can you find compatibility with what you're putting on your plate and being at ease with everything around you? And there is a sense of ease and peace and calm that comes with that. I know I felt a difference myself when I finally got rid of the last animal products in my diet, which was dairy products. It was after some period of practice with mindfulness, and I just felt less and less comfortable with. I thought, this is inconsistent here. There is a conflict here that I am really caring for. I travel a lot on wildlife advocacy with my husband, and I work with reducing those problems of using animals as objects. And yet here I am still eating dairy products, and it just started to become so uncomfortable that I thought, let's just let that one go. And that's made a difference.
To make that transition, I know a lot of people have issues with dairy that they don't even realize until they give dairy up.
Yeah, well, it's got that biochemical cascade that there's a reason that babies like their milk. It's because there's a whole little pleasure cycle connected with it. So understanding that helps a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It kind of moves people into another direction because it really does impact your health and your overall mind and mood, everything.
Yes, exactly right.
So it's not just like one component. I think a lot of times people, it's great to do it for not just for our personal health, but the implications it has for the planet and animals and what have you. And so there's a whole big piece that goes around veganism that maybe, someone that's new to it might not quite understand.
Well, and I think that it's because, Marianne, that we are so used to thinking in another way. We grew up just eating these things and using these things, and we just have, once someone awakens you to looking at that in a new way, whether it's a person you talked to, something you heard, something you read, or maybe just a realization while you were driving through the fields and saw animals or something was on your plate, that I think that we all have that compassion and natural caring, and it's kind of pushed down like the beach ball, kept below the surface. And this, I believe, and I go into this, as you know, a lot in the Mindful Vegan, this is one of the reasons there's so much resistance to just being at a table with a vegan, because they point out this inconsistency that you might have of loving animals while eating them, maybe not consciously. But there's a discomfort there, and when someone, just by whether they say anything to you or not, they're asking that you be a more conscious eater, and that requires change. That can be uncomfortable, and people don't want it, so you become the messenger they want to shoot.
or the tribe they want to be a part of.
That's exactly right. But that's why I talk about this in the Mindful Vegan too. What is the best way to bring people on board? If you are an angry finger shaker and in your face, have any of us ever been shamed into a change that really stuck? We have to think about that. So the best thing, and this is where mindfulness practice comes into, because you become a kinder person because you are able to cultivate those states. You can be more calm and equanimous in conversations with others, whatever their particular proclivity is or whatever kind of food they're eating. And much better to be drawn to something by attraction than try to push or shame or blame somebody into a change.
Well, and it really, I think what's nice is just by being a present person who's aware of these things allows the conversation to open.
Perfect.
It's like,
perfectly put. Thank you. Yeah.
And that's exactly what your book, The Mindful Vegan, does, is it really starts that conversation as well. Do you know, gosh, we're just having such a great time talking on this, and I don't want to give much more away because your book is just phenomenal, and I think those who are interested and feel that they are going to be following a vegan or mindful path or both need to pick up your book because I found it to be such a great resource. I love my copy. Yeah. So where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
Yeah. Well, my website is, of course, you can have links in the notes so you'll be able to
to that.
Well, my website is LaniMuelrath.com, but it's also the MindfulVeganBook.com will get you there and it's also the Plant-Based Journey will get you there because that was my previous book. I have very deep resources on plant-based nutrition, vegan living, travel, all of it, fitness. It's all there.
Well, and congratulations, too, because I know even before your book was released, it was #1 in holistic medicine, and how exciting, it's been so widely.
Oh, yeah.
People are just loving your book, and loving the message that you have. So.
Well, I love that, too, because it popped up in the #1 in vegan diets, and then one day it said holistic medicine, and I thought, wow, this is nice. I guess I'm in the holistic medicine category, and just like you, Marianne, my approach is holistic, and that's why we're so compatible here, because yours is, too.
Oh, well, Lani, thank you so much for taking the time and just being on the show with us here today.
My complete pleasure.
Well, that's the end of our time today. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.